well as the tips that we've already given you for the individual disciplines, here are some tips for getting your best overall performance on race day. My number one tip is don't do anything new on race day. It's amazing how things can go wrong if you haven't done something before. If you've got any new equipment, then test it out in training before your event. If you're going to try a new nutritional product, again, test it in training. If there's something that requires a skill, then practice it until you can do it confidently in your training before you do it in a race. It's very important to know the course. If you don't know where you're going, things can go wrong. Make sure that you study the course maps carefully. If you've got the opportunity to go around the part of the course beforehand, then do so you're familiar with what's coming up. Psychologically, it's much easier if you know the details of the terrain. The other part of the course that you really should look at really carefully is transition. Things can go wrong in transition, they can be quite complicated. Every race is unique, and it's important that you look at the course from the water's edge through to your bike, from the bike through to the mount line, and then at the end of the bike, check that where you dismount the bike, you know where to come and find your shoes and where you should go out on the run. It's important to get your nutrition right before the race. That means not just on the race day, but in the few days prior to the race. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, you just have to keep what we normally call a healthy diet with enough carbohydrate there. There's no need to overeat, but just make sure that you are getting enough carbohydrate and good food in you in the couple of days before the race. It can be difficult when there's a lot of travelling to be done, so sometimes it takes a little bit of organisation. Prepare some food beforehand and make sure that you're going to be fueled properly before the race day. It's important to pay special attention to your nutrition on race day. You want to eat a meal 2 to 3 hours before you start, which has got a fairly good proportion of carbohydrates in it and nothing that's going to upset your stomach during the race. Ideally, you should practice this beforehand. Something that you can train hard on will probably be okay on race day. In most events, it's a good idea to have a sports drink to use during the event, which will help keep you hydrated and fuel you throughout the race. You can use a drink like Gatorade, which can come in a ready-made form, or in a powder. If you're using it in a powder, you should make it up carefully to the correct concentration, usually one that you've practiced with beforehand. It's a good idea to work out beforehand how much fluid you're likely to use on race day. Take into account the environmental conditions, how hot the temperature will be, whether it's humid or not. It's quite an individual thing as well though, so you can work out in training perhaps beforehand how much fluid you typically consume. You can do that by weighing yourself before and after a training session at the same intensity as your race and in the same environmental conditions. During the race, it's important to use the fluid that you prepared beforehand. You've got your bike bottles on the bike, but you might want to set an alarm on your watch to beep every 15 minutes just to remind yourself to take a small drink. It's best to take frequent, small amounts of drink rather than to have a whole bottle at one time. Another thing that you should think carefully about beforehand is what you're going to do after the race. You can really improve how quickly you recover from a race by taking a few simple steps. One thing is to have some food and drink available that you can take on board straight after the race and replenish the fluid and the energy that you use during the event. Another thing is to make sure that you do a little bit of a cool down, either a little spin on the bike or a little jog, and that will help your limbs recover much more quickly. My final tip is to pay attention to your mental preparation. Most people put a lot of time into the physiological preparation and they don't think so much about mentally preparing. The main thing is to be positive. Think about yourself doing everything perfectly, visualize you going through the race and practicing all the skills in a perfect way. Then you'll find that on race day everything will come together and you'll get the result that you've dreamed of.